All right, we're taping this late Thursday morning Pacific time. Our friend Brian Windhorst is here from ESPN. This is the time of year when ESPN works Brian Windhorst. I think 78 straight days? Do you get to go to the bathroom? Do you get to eat lunch? What happens? Is it just you're just in front of a camera at all times?
Yeah. It's 1:45-ish Eastern. I woke up at 5:45 Eastern. I was on my first Zoom at 6. I did 4 hours straight on Get Up and First Take. Then I recorded my pod, the Hoop Collective. And then I just did some digital recordings. So I pretty much have been on straight. As soon as we're done here, I will immediately go to do NBA Today. And then I have to take my son to baseball practice at 4:00.
This is great. I like getting you when you're punchy. I don't want you. I don't want to be the first appearance. I want to be like the fifth when you're just kind of letting it fly and going. I would have picked a different day for this.
Enjoyable.
I would have picked a different day. I didn't realize you were that slammed.
No,
yeah. So,
but see, that's the thing. Once we go, there's no stopping it.
We've both been doing this a long time, and we've been covering the NBA for a long time in various forms. This is the most wide open, fascinating, intriguing playoffs. So one of the reasons I wanted you to come on is I wanted to go through the most intriguing playoff storylines and try to figure out if we could create a hierarchy. But I'm going to jump ahead just quickly to the Friday night where we have Minnesota playing OKC. We have Miami playing Chicago. And I think Minnesota and Miami are on blow it up watch. Let's say both of those teams lose, who is a bigger blow it up candidate? Copyright Kevin O'Connor. For you, Miami just misses the playoffs. They lose 2 play-in games and they're out. Or Minnesota, this Gobert disaster, and then they end up losing to this OKC team that doesn't even have a center. Going into the summer, what's the team you're watching more?
I don't see how Minnesota can blow it up. They're kind of locked in. I mean, I suppose you're talking in code about a Karl Towns trade. Is that that's the code you're talking?
Either. Do you go big on a Towns trade, or do you just say, whoa, the Gobert, this is a sunk cost. Maybe we can dump him to a team like Dallas that might be desperate enough to grab him?
Boy, that's a really good podcast topic. I hadn't thought about Minnesota. I think there are some teams that if they have a failure, I mean, one of the issues about this whole season was there's too many teams that are all in or close to all in. And there's just not enough success to go around. You know, David Stern used to give these lectures about how for every team rising, there's a team falling. And for every owner that's thrilled, there's an owner who's depressed because there's only, I don't remember how many games there are, 1,800 or something. There's a finite amount of wins and it's not getting bigger except for Adam Silver who keeps adding games. So, like, for example, in the East, we got, how many years has it been since the Celtics have paid the tax? Like a decade?
Right.
They're all in. Wick is digging down and paying the tax. The Sixers got Harden. They got to worry about, they, robbed from Peter to pay Paul this season. What's the fallout there? And the Bucks, I mean, nobody's talking about this, but Giannis has a contract extension option coming in September. And his comment on that is going to be pretty important. And so if this doesn't go well for the Bucks, they got Middleton, who's a free agent. They got potentially, he can opt out. They got Brook Lopez, who's a free agent. Are they re-signing those guys? So, and then we got all these teams that are getting eliminated that are acting like, well, just you wait, America. And that's what we're getting from Portland and like Dallas and, Houston. They're all like, okay, here we go. We're going to go get veterans. And I'm like, well, you and 11 other people.
Right.
So I know that's a long-winded way of saying, Minnesota, I guess, could do that. The thing that happened with Gobert is they kind of, cast their lot because they're locked in terms of players and picks. The only guy that they have on their roster that's got super value that isn't one of their like max guys is Jaden McDaniels, who they're probably about to sign to a contract that's going to be that level. So
yeah,
Towns would be interesting because his contract is so locked in. You'd be trading for a guy with a lot on his deal.
But
I
you'd
think the
also
answer
be
is
you'd also be trading for a guy with a lot on his deal. I mean, there's like, I think one of the years starts with a 6 at one point.
mhm.
So
Well, that's Dame.
yeah,
You know, as we're starting to ramp up Dame stuff. Dame's last year, age 36, I think, is 63.
right.
63. When I started covering the NBA, the max was 14. I'm starting to feel my age. Anyway,
Oh my God. Remember that?
I think the answer is Miami,
Yeah.
because first off, Miami always hunts stars, and I don't know for sure, just to be clear, but Miami has they haven't gotten into the bidding seriously for any of these stars in the last like 18 months. And I think it's because they've been keeping their assets dry and waiting for a player to say, I want to be in Miami. Now they're going to have competition because there's going to be several places where if guys want to force their way, they could try to force their way. You know, New York is still out there. Phoenix, I know that it doesn't seem like Phoenix, but they have Ayton and they have Chris Paul's contract. They can't give you any draft picks, but if a star player wanted to, or, you know, even like a sort of a ancillary star wanted to force, you know, Phoenix could still do something. So there's going to be, you know, issues with that, but, you know, Miami, this is what they do. They try to go get stars, and their last iteration was Jimmy. And for better or worse, Jimmy's gotten them to one finals and then was within a whisker of getting them to another. It hasn't been the most decorated run in Heat history, but it's been a decent marriage. And he's still got, you know, gas in the tank. And they have tradable contracts. Tyler Hero comes on at that huge number. They have Duncan Robinson. Obviously, Duncan's not an asset, but you can use him in a big deal. And so when you're starting to dream about Dame Lillard spots, Miami's on that list. So, you know, Pat Riley always thinks big, and I expect them to be thinking that way if that's what happens.
The problem for them is the moves they made in the last 18 months really have hindered their chance to go all in for somebody, because you're going to have to take a bad contract back, which I thought was telling in the Gobert trade last year and a couple other ones where teams want the flexibility over, oh, we're taking this poison thing too. Oladipo, player option for 9.5 next year. He's taking that. Robinson, 16.1 next year. That nothing you can do with that one. And then Lowry's an expiring.
It keeps going for a really long time.
Yeah. So I almost wonder. Well, it's tough because they have Bam. To me, I wonder if they would go the other way and say, all right, Luka, like a year from now, 2 years from now, do we go the other way? Do we zag for a year? Do we try to tank for a year? Do we just say, fuck it, we're out of this? We had a nice little run. We made the finals. We almost made the finals the second time. This is kind of who we are. And you shop Jimmy. And then you just kind of eat it for a year.
This is kind of what they've done this year, isn't it?
Yeah,
they haven't made any moves this year.
Yeah, true. Because I think they knew. Well, there was two things. One is I think they were kind of waiting for the team to wake up, and it just never did. And the playing game was alarming. That's why I think tomorrow night's going to be so fascinating with them, because I actually just think Chicago is a better team. Like even Vegas has Miami as 5.5 point favorites, and I based on what the team's 20 games under 500 covering the spread this year over and over again. We're like, oh, it's the Heat, it's the Heat, it's the Heat. They've shown nothing. So I do wonder, I think Butler's such an intriguing trade piece, because you're talking about all these teams that want veterans, they want to make the big push, whatever. That's the guy to get. You know, it's a little risky. You got to have the right culture. You got to have the right coach who's okay.
Well, you're
going to
have to understand that you're not going to love him in the regular season, but you're going to love him in the playoffs. That's the Jimmy Butler experience.
And the Minnesota side, it's just if they wanted to play the Towns card, that's about as good of a trade piece as anyone's probably going to have this summer, because, as you said, he's got the long contract and he's a unique player that you could build a really interesting team around.
Well, you said one name. I'm not going to say the names because then I'll get aggregated. But
the
if you're looking at the top 10 players in the league, just think of them, whoever they are.
Yeah.
There's a number who we're not 100% sure are going to be happy in the next 12 to 18 months or sooner. the Heat are aware of the same situation, and they know that they're, a place where people like that sometimes go. So I think the Heat, already have their eye on what the next incarnation is, which is, by the way, not surprising because that's the way the Heat always operate. The only time they were ever caught flat-footed was when LeBron left.
Right.
Other than that, they're always ahead of the game.
You could go the other way and you could say they got incredibly lucky with the Jimmy Butler thing. And if that didn't happen, it would have been a really long 10 years. It's basically...
Maybe, but it did happen.
No, I know. But if Philly had just played that correctly and figured out a way to just keep him versus being like, oh, all right, okay, go to Miami. Like, I still don't totally understand how it played out that way. But they pulled it off. They got it. It was also 4 years ago.
Right. I mean, they chose Tobias Harris over him. Kind of.
Yes, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, I also think Jimmy knew more earlier than everybody on the Ben Simmons thing. He was like, these guys don't get it. I think, and he was tighter with Embiid, but he clearly sniffed out the Ben Simmons piece of it and was like, really? You're going to go all in on this guy? This guy doesn't get it. And he was, I would say, kind of vindicated. All right. Most intriguing playoff storylines. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
I have this. I rank these. I'm not attached to the rankings, and you can talk me out of them. And as we go, if we hit one that, and I didn't tell you what these were ahead of time because I wanted your natural reaction after 7 cups of coffee, being up since 5:45 in the morning.
I don't even drink coffee, but go ahead.
Okay, whatever. Red Bull, whatever you're doing to keep you floating. My number one storyline is not LeBron related because I don't work for ESPN. So by law, I don't have to put LeBron first because I'm not getting the Disney paychecks anymore. My number one storyline is this it for Golden State? What happens if they just lose in round 1? What happens if they get their ass kicked in round 2? This nucleus, this run they've had basically since 2013, which is now 10 years. Steph Curry is now 35, as great as he is. Draymond, I have no idea what's going to happen with him this summer. My guess is that when we're talking about veterans and people who need stuff, like that's a guy who's going to become more and more appealing as we get closer to the summer. You start ignoring some of the regression offensively, stuff like that. He still had a great defensive season. They just feel like they're between two eras. And I wonder if they get their ass kicked in the playoffs, will that propel them to ease into the next era? What are you feeling about the Warriors right now?
Well, the tipping point is Bob Myers. So Bob Myers is a very loud free agent.
Yeah.
And
he's deafening.
Yeah. I mean, he's got this podcast. It's like, I mean, he's very clearly letting people know that he may be interested in a media career in the short-term future, but not necessarily. I'm not sure. I feel like if Joe Lacob wanted to make that an ultimate priority, that Bob Myers, number one, would never have hit free agency, and number two, it never would have gotten public. But whatever, they don't have an agreement. I believe Steve Kerr has 1 year left on his contract. So just keep that in mind. Steve Kerr is also coaching the Team USA the next 2 summers, World Cup this summer, Olympics next summer. And I'm not saying he can't do both, but just keep that in mind.
That's a lot.
Then you have Draymond. Then you have these new rules that the Warriors didn't get a lot of relief in this deal. It was mostly an anti-Warriors, anti-Clippers CBA.
Right.
Not all of the details are out, and from what I understand, they're still haggling over the timing that some of these rules might be put in. But it's definitely a CBA that was targeted, against the team that won the title with a $350 million payroll and could approach 400 in the very short term future.
Yep.
All of that is a factor. Clay is extension eligible. Clay's looked better. What do you do there? It's uncertain. Like I say, like somebody in the East is going to be left holding the bag and not get out of the second round. And it's probably going to be Philly or Boston. I don't see Milwaukee, but Philly or Boston is going to be staring into the abyss like what just happened. We're done in, by May 15th.
Yeah.
And if the Warriors stub their toe, like they stubbed it about 30 times over the regular season, they could be facing a crossroads. Now, they still have Steph Curry, who is still awesome, and he's still under contract. They still have Clay. Wiggins is a really good piece for them. You know, they have some young guys that are interesting. Like, they're not going anywhere. The question is, are they going to go, you know, full bore gas to the floor, Thelma and Louise over the financial cliff? Because if it's not a championship team, it's a harder. There's a lot of the questions get a lot more difficult in that regard.
Can I give you the greatest who says no I've given anybody in a while for a fake trade?
Okay.
That will never happen. Golden State loses to Sacramento in 6 or in 5. And it's just, they're in the abyss. It's like, oh my God, what are we doing? Charlotte wins the lottery. Golden State and Charlotte, for some reason, are at a cocktail event or something. It's like, hey, what are you doing with those picks? Hey, what are you doing with Curry? You know, Curry could come home to Charlotte. Well, we need the number 1 pick to do that. Probably some other stuff too. Who says no faster? This trade will never happen. I'm only doing it for social media so people can stare at us and get mad at it. This trade will never happen. But who says no faster?
I'll throw in one more variable there just to support your case.
Yeah.
Potential brand new owner of the Bobcats in the short-term future.
Right. And with the little winkage at Steph. Hey, wink, wink. Down the road.
Ishbia traded 4 first-round draft picks within 12 hours of becoming the owner. Right. Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez didn't even have the team, and we're trading away the whole future. How fast can the new owner, trade away all the draft picks?
He does a whole study. He does one of those rich guy studies, and he's like, look, these big centers, it's 50-50. For every Wembanyama, there's a Greg Oden. Who knows? Maybe he'll get hurt. I could bring Steph Curry home. I'm a hero. I could build a whole contender. Steph can play till he's 46 with the way he's shooting. It's just a fun one. I was thinking about that. I think Golden State would say no faster.
Yeah, of course. You could probably trade the Wembanyama pick for 99% of the league, but he is in the 1%.
I did when I did trade value in early February. I had the rights to Wembanyama as the 25th best trade asset, and now I think it's in the top 10. Now that we've actually gotten out of the season, I think whoever gets that's why I bring up the Steph thing. It's such a fun one because for Golden State, it'd be like, okay, thanks, Steph. We're sending you home. You're here on Charlotte, and now we get to actually do the rebuild that we should probably rebuild. But on the flip side, you can never trade Steph Curry, which is why it's a great who says no. And that's why the aggregators should not take this too seriously.
Oh, well, now we're in trouble again. I'll get a call. Did you say on the BS report that the Warriors are going to trade Steph? I
like
see
that you still call this the BS
I see
report.
that here on Twitter.
I still call it the BS report all the time, too.
What's it called?
That's just my name.
The BS podcast.
The Bill Simmons podcast.
Did I just violate a trademark rule that was negotiated?
No.
In a settlement?
Not at all.
Okay.
I like everyone at ESPN now. Things are great. I'm getting along with everybody these days. With this Warriors thing, though, I find it far-fetched to believe a team that got knocked out in the first round would have Draymond, Clay, and Curry next year for a combined $7 gazillion. Like,
well, it also
this
just
is probably
on,
for those three. I would say realistically, if they're out fast, I don't think it's a 3 anymore. Personally, that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think it's more the cost than anything. Also, somebody might be crazy enough to throw Draymond a massive contract because he thinks they're going to be great for their roster. And he might be for some teams.
I think that's going to happen. Or there's sign and trade stuff. I think somebody's going to look at him and say, that's the veteran we need. We get him 3 years, 95 million, whatever it is. And he solves a lot of, change of scenery, chip on his shoulder stuff. There's a lot of reasons for it.
There's a Michigan State mafia in the NBA now. Because you got these Michigan State guys, Ishbia, Gilbert, and I don't know if Tom Gores went to Michigan State, but he's a Michigan guy. Yeah. Nobody loves Michigan State guys more than Michigan State guys. So like, was that a little
Ishbia Easter egg?
No. Okay. Well, I mean, he's already hired 2 Michigan people, one Michigan University of Michigan and one Michigan State guy. So, but like if they hadn't have done the Durant trade, and they had flexibility this summer, I would have thought for sure they would go out. They would have gone after Draymond. But there's Michigan State guys who love Michigan State guys. Just put it that way.
My favorite new owner syndrome moment of all time is Ishbia not even totally having the team yet and finding out that James Jones wouldn't give up Mikal Bridges in the Durant trade. And within 3 hours, that decision was reversed. He's like, what are we doing? Just throwing everything. We have a chance to get Kevin Durant. I don't care. I'm the new owner of the Suns. And that was it.
And Bridges goes to Brooklyn. He's like throwing up 40-point games left and right.
I mean, yeah, it's about as much as anyone's ever given up in a trade. Just on Matt Ishbia really quickly, because you and I have not talked about this on this podcast, but we've texted privately about it. The Matt Ishbia, Dan Gilbert rivalry / feud, not getting enough attention, not getting enough play. We rarely have two owners that have a real history of beef. Shout out to the Netflix series Beef. You could have done it season 2 about these two guys. He gets voted in. Dan Gilbert abstains.
Yeah.
Refuses to vote. 29-0. He gets approved. Dan Gilbert's like, fuck that. I'm not even voting. So we have that. When was the last time we had owner animosity like this?
That's quite, I'm sure it's happened before, because I'm sure that there's business. These guys are all moving in and out of business with each other, but I can't remember it. Doesn't mean that there isn't a history of it. The thing is that Ishbia and Gilbert, and I've only met Matt once, so I'm not trying to say that I know him well, but Ishbia and Gilbert have a lot in common. They both sort of did self-made mortgage companies out of Detroit.
Yep.
Now Gilbert's a lot older, but they both did it about the same time in their life. And I won't get into, this isn't a Forbes podcast. I won't get into the machinations of some of the business deals that they've done, but both of them at about the same age made an incredible business deal and then really, really wanted to buy a team right away. And Ishbia tried to buy several teams, NFL and NBA teams, some public, some not. Dan Gilbert was like this close to buying the Milwaukee Brewers. Talk about a sliding door moment in the history of professional sports in America. And couldn't get the Brewers and instead got the Cavs. And both, like almost at the exact same age, became ultra wealthy and bought teams. And both came in. Now, in 2005, Dan Gilbert fired the coach, I believe, within 9 days, and he fired the GM within 6 weeks. And then I think they had 8 new players, 7 or 8 new players by the next season. New coach, new GM, and like 7 or 8 new players. I guess, and this is faster. And so in 2023 time, trading away 4 first-round draft picks in the biggest trade in franchise history, 6 hours after you buy the team is kind of similar. But,
and Bridges and King. Well, I love...
That's right, of course.
The other thing with the Ishbia thing is he's basically on Dan Gilbert's corner with everything he's doing, right? He's basically, the company he's building is the Dan Gilbert Company 2.0 version. And they start...
some of the ways they do business. Like, again, if Dan and Matt were here on this pod with us, they would probably be able to point out 500 ways that they're different. But Gilbert had this, with his mortgage company, he had this book of isms where, whatever, it was a culture thing. And Ishbia, he's super duper into basketball. He has this thing where like he forms his teams into actual teams, and they have coaches and they have like huddles and everything acts like a team. It's the same concept. They're inspiring their mortgage brokers to go out and do sales, but they have a concept, a culture concept. So there's a lot going there. And so I look forward, and they basically live relatively close to each other. And they've got like the two biggest mortgage companies in America. So we probably talked about too much, but it is interesting.
No, you didn't even mention the attack ads. There was like local attack ads against each other. I love that story. The best owner rivalry before this, which was way more good natured, but was still a legitimate rivalry with some edge to it, was Wick and Lacob. And I'm convinced, and I'll be convinced till the day I die, that the reason when the KD Jaylen Brown stuff started last summer, and the Celtics should just publicly shut that down immediately, right? Immediately. There's no reason to let that fester for 2 seconds. You come out and...
Unless they thought they could make the deal.
Well, that's why they didn't shut it down. And right. I think Wick was the one who was the most intrigued by it because he just lost to Lacob in the finals. And and the Warriors were, at that time, one of the other threats to get KD. And I do think those two franchises and those two owners definitely measure them. So Lacob used to be a minority owner for the Celtics. So there's just some history. This is way better, though. It's way juicier. All right. Second most intriguing playoff storyline for me. I'm still not going with LeBron. Is this the last Tatum Brown run?
Talk about a consequential vote. I put my vote in on Monday. You had a ballot, right? I saw you talking with Priscilla about it.
Yeah, I did. I did Jalen for a third team. I actually thought it was fairly unassailable.
Yeah, I put him on third team. I mean, I have a general rule on this. I've said this before, that if it's close, I give it to the guy with the contract bonus. Oh,
interesting.
Sometimes, yeah, I just tie goes to the multimillionaire. The crazy thing here is this is a simplistic way of putting it. If Jalen gets voted All NBA, he's going to stay a Celtic. If Jalen doesn't get voted All NBA, he's going to be a free agent next year. Because if he gets voted All NBA, he's Supermax eligible, and he can get offered like 240 or 250 million. I cannot see the Celtics not offering it, and I cannot see him turning it down. Just can't see it. Now, whether he's going to be there for all 5 of those years, how can the Celtics, even if you can make an argument that he's maybe not a Supermax player, and you don't have to give all the way up to the Supermax, to the 30%. Or the 35%, you can negotiate in between. But I just don't see Jalen accepting anything other than the full max. And if you're the Celtics, knowing that you can't extend him, how do you not offer it?
Can I flip this? Can I flip this the other way?
That you would trade him?
Because I've heard this argument. Well, I've heard this argument that if he's All NBA, then that means he's going to be a Celtic, and it makes sense. On the other hand, you're talking about paying 2 Supermax guys. You're talking about paying a lot of money to a guy who's said a couple strange things during the season that I think has made everybody kind of at least look a little sideways at the situation. Like, is he happy here? Does he like the city? Does he like the team? This
is the problem with trading Jalen, is because the issue is Jalen, the Celtics signed him to a great contract. It's like the average is like $25 million a year.
It was too good of a contract,
as it turns out. So the thing is, any team that would trade for him has the same problem. They can't offer him enough of an extension to keep him out of free agency. So
they'd have to get the extension first and then trade him down the road if it led to that.
No, he's not going to extend. It's just not going to happen so the rule is you can get a 20% raise on the last year of your contract. So if you make $1, you can get. Oh yeah.
No, I'm talking if they got the Supermax, then it would be at least a year after that. By the way, right. Everything I'm saying, I want them to keep these guys. I've said that. I've been consistent on it.
Well, this is what
I think
I'm
they
saying.
have something special with these two. I don't want them to trade them.
I don't see how, if he makes All NBA, I don't see how they don't offer it to him, even if they know he might not be a true Supermax player.
Right.
Because, by the way, Tatum's going to qualify too. Tatum, you have to get All NBA 2 out of 3 years.
Oh, you're right.
Or your last year.
Yeah.
So even though Tatum can't sign it this summer, Tatum getting All NBA last year and this year, he's going to be qualified. So if they keep him and both sign with Supermaxes, I did the math on it. You're looking at roughly $110 million a year for the two of them. $55 million average.
Jesus.
Obviously, especially with the new rules where teams that are too high have limitations, it's not like on the whiteboard, it's like, holy Moses. So But the thing about it is, let's say they say, well, we don't want to pay them both 100. We don't want to pay them both $55 million a year. We don't think that's worth it. We're going to trade Jaylen Brown. Like, let's say you come to that consensus. The team that trades for him inherits the same problem. They can't extend him.
Yeah.
Because he could only sign for it. So the rule's about to change. It used to be you could sign for 20%. And in the new rules, because of people like Jaylen Brown, they said, okay, we're going to kick it to 40%. So now if you make $1 and you want to stay with your team, you can get $1.40. But the problem is that contract is so good that even at 40%, even if he got a 40% raise, it's still probably not going to be his market value contract. So let's say you find a beautiful trade with Team X for Jaylen Brown because you don't want to pay him. Team X can't offer a trade like they know they're going to keep him because
and then he's unhappy that he didn't get the max. Yeah.
Or even if he gets to that place and he's like, oh my God, I've dreamed every day of my life to be in City X and I love playing with player Y.
Houston.
You should absolutely not sign. It's a gap in the rule, and it's still going to be a gap, it looks like, even in the new CBA.
As usual, they didn't consult with us on the new CBA. They didn't ask for input.
I don't want that. Those guys it's a miserable job. It's a miserable job.
The only thing I wish they had put in there is I think a team should be rewarded for drafting and keeping somebody. Like the Warriors having Curry for 14 plus years at this point, and him being as good as he is, and if he's making as much money as he's making, maybe he should count 75% against the cap instead of 100, or 75% against your luxury tax instead of 100, stuff like that.
Did Joe Lacob slip you some sort of
No, I think the Celtics are in the same thing with Tatum and Brown. I think it should matter if somebody stays on the same team, especially in this era where we've turned into AAU. And if a franchise and a star have something special, then it should be advantageous in some way, is my only point.
Aren't you a coastal elite thinking that way? No.
Well, Giannis is in the same spot with Milwaukee.
$400 million payroll. You have to pay the luxury taxes. I don't care if you drafted him. That was like the thing. The Warriors' whole thing was, well, it's not fair the luxury tax is not fair because we shouldn't be penalized for just being great drafters and great developers. And I'm like, totally right, dudes. Completely agree. It would not be fair for you to draft Steph Curry and Draymond and Clay and not keep them. But what about Wiggins?
Right.
Because it's Wiggins that was a difference maker in the finals last year. It's Wiggins who is the remnant of the Durant contract, because it was Durant and they flipped it to Russell and they flipped it to Wiggins. The last vestige of the 2016 cap spike, if I wanted to write like a real high-minded essay that 195 people would read and then talk about on Reddit, I would write Andrew Wiggins, the last vestige of the 2016 cap spike. I would write this big think piece. But it's true.
Yeah.
Andrew Wiggins is the, contractual grandson of Kevin Durant.
Right.
That is so I'm just saying, to the Warriors, cool dudes. I don't care if you spend $900 million on Steph Curry, but you got to give up Wiggins. They wouldn't have won the title last year. So while they say that it's all about keeping the players that you did, they really don't mean that. They really want to have the cake and eat it too. And I don't honestly care, but it's my job to call it out.
What about Boston with Tatum and Brown? What about Milwaukee with Giannis? What about where Cleveland's going to be with Evan Mobley in 10 years? Assuming that they try to turn him into their Tim Duncan. I do feel like it should be a tiny bit of an advantage at some point. Because I would rather see guys stay on teams than move around.
There's more small markets than there are big markets. And they get voting power in how they put this together. And so our long struggle to fight player desires, which is to live in the big cities on the coasts and in the South, with the numbers in the mid markets, goes on, and it will go on longer after you and I are gone. It'll still be going on.
Where are we going? I plan on doing this for 30 more years. Come on, Windhorst.
I don't know. Someday somebody at ESPN will push me right out the door. That's how it goes there. I don't know if you ever heard.
My goal is for Orlando to be finally ascend to the status of a destination. Because last time I checked, they were also in Florida, like Miami. And last time I checked, they have good young players.
Remember in the 90s and early 2000s, Orlando was the place to be. And then somebody got an atlas and saw Miami. Like, okay, I've told this story before, but I don't think I've told it on your pod. Like, one of my favorite stories I heard in NBA is Tracy McGrady told it to me about when he was a free agent. And, he goes down to Miami for his recruiting visit. And Riley picks him up, drives him to Alonzo Mourning's house, which is on Biscayne Bay. And Riley disappears. See you later, guys. I don't know, he chills with Mourning for however long, and all of a sudden, off Mourning's deck or dock comes this awesome speedboat. Mourning's like, let's go. I'm making up some of this, but this is a general story.
Yeah.
They get into the speedboat, and they tear off across Biscayne Bay, by American Airlines Arena, across Miami, wind in their face, ocean, bay, nightlife, sky, palm trees, pull into Pat Riley's house, which is also on the dock. He used to call it Casa Riley.
Yeah.
Riley's holding the max contract. Here you go, Tracy, $100 million. Tracy said no to sign in Orlando.
Ugh.
Because Orlando at one time was the real place to be. I don't know if it can be again, but I know he was from that area. I know it's not apples to apples, but I just look for any excuse to tell that story.
A, great story. B, there was a Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, Tim Duncan possibility for like 2 minutes. That was really exciting early days of the internet. I'm going to move to number, I guess this will be my new number 2 because we kind of shot down the original number 2 because Jaylen Brown's, he's going to get all NBA, which probably removes any of that intrigue from the table. The new number 3, Jokic, if they don't do well in the playoffs this year, I think officially starts edging toward being his generation's version of, I wrote down Steve Nash, I wrote down James Harden, I wrote down George Gervin, I wrote down Dominique Wilkins. Now, he's probably more impactful than all of those guys. He's only 27 years old. The last 5-6 years he's put together. I think we were talking on the pod the other day about how Luka went 38-44. And it's like, how many guys in the league are just a guaranteed 46 wins? I think Jokic is a guaranteed 46 wins. We saw it last year. He's playing with a G League team and they won 46 games. And yet he still needs to make a run here, and it's all set up. They have home court. They have a really good team. They have a real home court advantage because of the altitude, especially when we get to round 3. It's all on a platter here. And if it doesn't happen this year, next year's chance isn't going to be as good. And then you start moving into that category that you don't want to be in. And those guys were great players. Like it's honestly not Nash's fault. He never made the finals, but he never made the finals. So to me, I'm watching that just as somebody who loves basketball, who loves Jokic. I love watching him. But at some point, it's got to happen in the playoffs. You got to put together some rounds.
Again, I talked earlier about the Celtics going into the tax. The Kroenkes went in the tax for the, I think, second or third time ever, and the first time in like 11 or 12 years. They just don't do it. And they don't stay there very long. They went into the tax because they thought this was a championship team. They have the best team they've ever had. This is the first time they've ever been a number 1 seed in their history. Maybe they were the number 1 seed in the ABA. I don't know, but they were never a number 1 seed in the NBA. And is that organization built to continue to spend money at that level for that team? And look, they've signed all those guys up. They extended Kentavious Caldwell-Pope as soon as they got him.
Yeah.
So like Porter's signed up. They went to the wall for that one. It was a questionable decision, but they went to the wall. Extended Aaron Gordon, not to mention what they're paying Jokic and Murray. So, and like I voted Michael Malone was on my all Coach of the Year ballot.
Was he the 3 spot?
I had him 2, and I had Bud 3 because I couldn't break the ties, and I just took the 2-1 seats.
Interesting.
I mean, it was more than just that. I mean,
yeah,
I had reasons for it, but like, if they don't do well, like he may face some scrutiny because he's holding the fullest deck they've ever had there. And I will say this, Jokic is not going to win the MVP probably. Whether or not that's fair or not depends on who you talk to. But him not winning the MVP might not be the worst thing for him because he's already going to deal with the fallout of potentially, if he doesn't get to the finals, doing it as a 2-time MVP. What if it was a 3-time MVP? What if the third straight time they shipped that trophy over to Serbia and he didn't do it in Denver because he was already out of the playoffs.
He didn't take shit for it last year because the team was so flimsy. This year's team is good, and there would have been a giant bullseye on him. I'm not sure he cares.
They're 12-11 since the All-Star break.
Right.
I know they tanked some games not tanked, but they just jettisoned some games at the end. But they're still 12-11.
The West was pretty much locked up for them, and it seemed like they took their foot off the pedal, and I get it, but this lined up perfectly. They don't have to play the Lakers in round one. They're going to play whoever wins this 8-9 game. They can let, hopefully, Phoenix and the Suns kick the shit out of each other, and hopefully that's a long series, and then they can get the remnants of that. But yeah, this Jokic thing, he has the potential to become this generation's kind of semi-tragic figure of the great player who just never found the right team. He wants to be there, though. I mean, he does.
He signed a Supermax extension. There was 0.0 drama and 0.0 attention. The Nuggets made 2 trips to Serbia last year, once to bring him his MVP and once to bring him his Supermax. And, Giannis signed the Supermax and we practically broke into SportsCenter and they haven't even won anything yet.
Right. True. Now it's time for LeBron. We don't have to do the can LeBron make one last finals because everybody's going to be talking about that constantly. I do feel like you can make a case that this will be his best chance to make a finals because of just the situation the West is in. And the next time...
He knows that. That's why he's playing on this ridiculous foot.
Right. Yes. Next time we see him in this situation, it will probably be in more of a ring-chasing capacity, I would guess. So I'll flip it around a little bit. We talked about this the other night on this pod, but I had to get your take. We are 2 weeks away from Curry versus LeBron round 2. It's a real thing that could happen. It would be one of the biggest round 2 series in the history of the league. It's the biggest playoff matchup I think the league can have from a casual fan interest standpoint. Do you think LeBron considers Curry a rival?
His feelings towards Curry have gone in and out.
Yeah.
Actually, when you're around long enough, this happens. Like you remember, like those just he looked at Curry with disgust at times, and also there was this time where it looked like he may come for him as the most popular player. It was like, oh my God, can Under Armour eat into Nike's market share? Well, as it turns out, Curry is great, but Under Armour isn't eating into Nike's market share, and nobody is questioning. The people are not putting LeBron and Curry on the same level. At least I don't think it's not really happening. So now all of a sudden he's posing with them at weddings, and they're all holding up the 4. Like, hey, we all got 4 titles, isn't it great? Hey, Steph, where did you get the first 3 of those? Who are those against? I don't even remember. But congrats on your last one. Like if you had showed LeBron, like. I'm not saying like in the locker room, in the losing locker room in 2017, but like even in like 2019, if you had showed LeBron a photo of him posing with Curry and the other Warriors holding up 4, like we're the 4 rings club, I don't think he would have said that.
Inconceivable.
I do think, So some of this, it depends on when you ask. There was a time where he sure as hell thought he was his rival, and not just on the court, but for marketing dollars. For shoe market share, for all that stuff. But I think that's cooled down for the time being. Doesn't mean he doesn't want to beat his ass, but it's cooled down.
There was some love bouquets thrown around like about a year ago that made me wonder if he was potentially planting the possible seeds to jump over the Warriors at some point. LeBron.
I thought it was the inverse. There was just, and it's laughable to talk about now, and I'm sure like the Warriors laughed about it then, but there was a single-digit percentage chance that the Warriors were not going to offer Curry the full max on the last contract, the one that put him into the super stratosphere. And by the way, they did in 5 seconds when it came to it. And the Lakers were going to have cap space. And so I thought he was seeding the ground just a little bit in case the Warriors messed around. But, he recovered from his injuries and was awesome, and the Warriors didn't mess around.
LeBron's son is going to go to USC. LeBron will be in the Lakers next year. And after that season, I think he goes into full ring chase mode and tries to figure out how can I stay
I think
in
he
the
goes into
finals
Bronny
picture.
chase. I think he goes into Bronny chase mode.
Yeah, but that's assuming Bronny comes into the league after a year, which I just don't think is realistic.
Well, the question is, it may not be the best thing for him, but is it going to be that's the way it's going to be?
Great question. I'm not touching it.
Me either.
Next intriguing question I got for you. This is a great one. This should have gone higher. I'm already criticizing my own list. What's a bigger fork in the road team for you? The Clippers or the Sixers?
So you can't pay Harden 5 years because he runs into the over 38 rule. But just the fact that I'm bringing that up should tell you all you need to know about that, about whether you should do it. If you're the Sixers, are you paying James Harden $200 million?
I mean, no. He didn't even play. He didn't even stay healthy for 4 months.
Okay.
He already looks banged up now.
Okay.
And he was playing
right.
great. I was going to put him on All NBA, but he's already hurt.
He gave kind of a very concerning interview when he came back and was like, "Yeah, my Achilles, I could barely walk on it." I was like, "Oh, I don't like hearing those words."
He's way slower. It's a fact.
So, what does that mean for Philly? Does that mean you're doing a sign and trade with Houston? Does that mean you're calling Dame Lillard, or you can't call Dame Lillard? That would be tampering, and that's illegal. What does it mean?
It feels like you can't pay him, and it feels like you get
Houston has $60 million in cap space. Who are they spending it on?
Right. Well, and the Dame thing, Maxey is a really good lead piece for a Dame trade, but I never understand what these draft picks, what the Suns gave up with Bridges for Durant blew my mind. After that, I was like, I don't even know what the concept, the Gobert trade we talked about. I have no concept of what somebody's worth. Like, what is Dame Lillard worth in a trade? You could tell me it's 7 picks. You could tell me it's Maxey and 2. I have no idea.
Well, that's why I think Dame could be doing the Blazers the greatest gift ever by asking for the trade now, because I don't see how Portland is going to compete. First off, there's not going to be a player I don't think that says send me to Portland, a star. Maybe I'd be proven wrong. Secondly, they have this encumbered pick that they owe Chicago, so they can't make, unless they make a side deal with Chicago, which Chicago would hold them hostage for probably, they can't offer 4 picks for the next Durant. They can offer, if they win the lottery this year, they could offer that, but they don't have the package. So considering where the prices are right now, plus there's a whole bunch of teams that are like, I got to have a veteran. I got to have a veteran. There's Houston comes out and is like, we got to have one. Portland's like, we got to have one.
Yeah.
Dallas is like, we got to have one. New York is lurking there. Miami was lurking there. If sometimes the greatest thing you can do is to say goodbye. And with Dame coming off this season where he was so awesome and is still only 32, every day that goes by, it's harder to get value for Dame because his contract is so big. So my impression is that wasn't what they were going to do. My impression was that, they're going to try to go get a star player now, but I'm like, who's the star player? Are you going to give up this year's lottery pick and the one future pick you can trade and Shaedon Sharpe for OG Anunoby? Does that trade change your situation, or does doing a Durant, Gobert, Mitchell style trade for for Damian, is that the better trade? Sending him away.
Well, you'd be happy to know you are with the Picasso, the trade machine, and I do have the trade for you if you're interested.
Okay,
but
let's hear it.
I will say, just from Portland standpoint, I love that we're talking about this. You can't decide anything till the lottery.
Absolutely, that goes.
If you win the lottery,
sure.
But if they win the lottery, Dame should stay. You actually will have a good chance.
I'm glad you said that because it can be used against me. No, all of this stuff is for May 17th.
You're deciding in May 18th.
Yeah,
I think Atlanta is a really intriguing Dame spot because Trey, that's a real centerpiece to get back, and there's a lot of cases you can make with Trey if you're acquiring him that. Hey, the guy's young. He's only been in the league 5 years. He's gonna figure out some shit. He's incredibly talented. He made the Eastern Finals.
Box office.
That could be this. Yeah, and that's somebody our fans can latch onto. And then if you're Atlanta, you get out of the trade business. You give up whatever else you have to give up to get Dame, and you put him with Murray, which is a really fun combo. And you have money, and you have players, and you have moves, and that one makes more sense to me.
It's this sort of thing. They don't have some picks though. Yeah, well, they have a little bit, but not the grand tour.
But they lost some
trades
to Murray.
Would be pretty valuable. The conversations like this are why you're worth $100 million.
100,
whatever you are, because that's higher. Really good. That's good. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. Okay. Quickly. We didn't do this one yet. I guess it's along the same thing as Trae Young auditioning to stay in Atlanta this round against the Celtics. What if they just get their asses kicked? That sets off a whole slew of, Atlanta, what do they do? Blow it up. Like if Boston sweeps Atlanta, that it's on.
Atlanta is underachieving. I mean, for their talent that they have. Can I say I was pretty surprised that they got Quinn Snyder to take that job?
Me too.
I mean, talk about not waiting and making a decision before the lottery. I mean, again, not that Quinn was like looking to coach Wembanyama, but just to see what the fallout would be. And they gave him a lot of money, but they didn't give him like insane, like don't say no money. And he also didn't get, to my knowledge, he didn't get like full control.
Yeah, he didn't get the Tibbs control package. And I didn't feel like it was like a Godfather offer either. I would have waited. I didn't understand it at all because it feels like between wherever Wembanyama lands and then who else knows what shakes out? Like what if Nick Nurse gets fired? Like what if you mentioned Mike Malone before, who I agree. I think he did a good job this year, but what if they lose in 5 in round 2 and they're like, shit, what do we do? We got to, I just would have waited. He must have really liked their talent.
What if Steve Kerr decides I'm going to take a couple years off? I'm going to coach the national team.
Me. All right. This is the second time you've mentioned that.
I'm not for aggregation. I'm just
there's smoke. There's smoke coming off the statements. No.
No.
I'm with you. There's 20 jobs that could be available at any given time. Yeah. I'm with you. I didn't love the Hawks job because the trade thing, which is funny because
it doesn't sound like Pop is going to retire. It's all indications are Pop's coming back.
Yeah.
Talk about before the lottery. But what if the San Antonio job comes up?
We only have 4 minutes left.
All right.
I have to throw this one at you. Giannis doesn't get enough credit for being one of the most intriguing playoff storylines for this standpoint. If they win again, which they're the favorites and they would be the team I bet my life on, you've officially cemented the I am the best player since LeBron case, which might be the case anyway. But now you're talking about a 5-year run with
usurping Durant and Curry. Is that what you're saying?
Best player since let's say LeBron, it goes to 2018. Right? That whole when he takes the Cavs to the finals. So Generation
Y or something. Yeah.
This last half decade, these 5 years, he would have 2 MVPs. I would assume 2 finals MVPs, 5 top 3 MVP finishes. And just year to year, eye test wise, is always in the mix, or was either the best player or he's in the debate for the best player. And now you're talking about a half decade kind of residing at that level, which I think is important because how many guys have gotten there in the history of the league? You're talking like 12, 13 guys total kind of swim in those waters.
Listen, you're talking to an unabashed Giannis believer from early in his career, and I voted for him for MVP this year. And I say that as a guy who voted for Embiid last year. Because when you watch him play, and you watch him do what he does at both ends, how do you not say he's the most valuable player?
I wanted to do it so badly. And the 63 games.
I mean, they're all good. They're all good options. Like I'm not, criticizing. I'm just telling you, you're talking to a guy who voted for Giannis.
Well,
So,
you're talking to a guy
I agree with all of
who still has nightmares about him in that Boston series last year.
You got lucky.
We got lucky.
Tatum did it when he did, man, because he is out of gas in Game 7.
Last thing before we go. Now we have 1 minute. I didn't put Durant here in most intriguing because I almost feel like that team still has the new car smell. And if it doesn't go well for them and they don't make the finals, I don't feel like it's the end of the world. Because I think then you leave and you go, well, we just all got together and Kevin got hurt and, he like
and Kyrie
next year
got traded the same week, but they were not in the same situation.
Yeah. So in a weird way, even though they should have the most pressure, and especially with Chris's situation, God only knows how many years he has left. And KD has never, he still has, you won too, but you had Curry. And yet I don't feel like they have a shitload of pressure. It does feel a little house money-ish because the longer they go on, I'd be like, whoa, this is amazing. These guys have barely played together. Whereas like a team like Denver or Milwaukee, there's some real pressure on those teams.
I agree. I think they're not even in the top 5 of your ranking pressure. The other thing is I never from day one understood what, I listened to the explanation, but I never could reconcile his decision to play with Kyrie in Brooklyn. I just always thought it was a bad choice. And I thought the day I learned of it, months before it actually happened, we all knew it was happening. I can't tell you how much better I believe the fit with Booker is. It's and I've spent a lot of time around the Suns. It is just like they may not win. They may not win for 10 different reasons. It may be injuries. It may be because they've overpaid for Durant. Maybe because the new CBA hits them particularly hard in terms of team building with where their salaries are going to be. There could be a dozen different reasons they don't win. But that pairing at least makes sense to me. Their personalities match. Their games match. Their timelines match. Booker can carry the big load at times. Durant wants to have a player like that. That, to me... And
they're malleable. They're malleable
sense.
Guys. They kind of fit into whatever the situation is. I only have 5 teams
I think it's a 3 or 4 year run.
I agree. I only have 5 teams that I think can win the title. Suns, Nuggets, Warriors, Bucks, Celtics. And I would have had the Sixers in there, but I don't think Harden's healthy. And I'm not putting him in that circle if he's not 100%. And he's not.
And you got to ask Joel to stay healthy for 4 rounds, which he's just not been able to do. I mean, maybe he will. I'm not saying he can't, but you're putting more of a burden on Joel in that case. All
right, go do your next 5 shows. Windhorst.
Thank you, Bill.
Pleasure,
I'm always happy to see you. I hope to see you in LA soon. Are you coming to these playoff games?
Of course, I'm going to come to at least a few of them. We got 2 LA teams. Same time. Great to see you.
It's been a while since we've had so much playoff games in LA. So, all right.
Thank you, Bill. It's been a real long time.
Be well.
See ya.